My name is William Cannon, and I wrote this tool, Saltcheck, and today I'm going to present on it, and hopefully the rest of the presentation goes very smoothly. We got all the bugs out at the beginning. So here's what we're going to talk about. Basically, first is a big welcome. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Good afternoon. Yes, come on. This is an interactive presentation. You can ask questions. You should feel very open. Okay, it's not, even though I put questions at the end here, that's just because I had to put it somewhere. Questions should probably be pelted throughout this presentation. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, give you a little history of why I think this tool is needed. I'm going to talk about how it's used and how you can make use of it, and the part that everybody's probably interested in, the demos. The proof is in the video. Okay, a little bit about me. I've been using SaltStack for over 4 years, and I started using it as a consultant, and I was a technical consultant. So what I used it for was really a Swiss Army knife. I would use it on all kinds of projects. And this ranged from setting up physical servers running Hadoop, meaning like racks and racks of servers, where they wanted to add more racks at any given moment, to white hat botnet testing on Amazon with 5 servers to 500 servers, this kind of stuff. Several years have gone by, and now you can see I've done infrastructure automation, deployment of custom applications, high availability, and so on. If you notice, I put my Twitter handle up here, and that's because if you follow me as part of this talk, immediately after this, I'm going to publish my slides, which include the demos, so then you can review them at your leisure, maybe after the party, maybe tomorrow. Here is a link also to the actual code. Now, this code has been accepted as part of Salt Open. That's version 1. Version 2, which has a really, really cool feature, is there's a pull request, but it hasn't been accepted yet because it lacks a unit test that I need to write. A little bit about my company, HospitalityPulse. We automate room inventory management and solve a lot of hotel problems. You may think that hotels don't actually have many problems. It's such an old business, an old space. You'd be totally wrong. With the invention of Expedia and all these other places, there's all kinds of things that hotels need. So we do a lot with room inventory. Our recent product allows you to get insights into how your hotel is actually running. Instead of, here's what you should do, it's, oh, by the way, here's how it's actually running. Oh, I wanted to bring up one thing. My company sponsored me to write Saltcheck and then to give it back to the open source community. And I think that's really cool. So a shout out to HospitalityPulse, and I hope a lot of your companies do the same thing. When I made this presentation, I was asked to come up with a problem statement, which I thought it was kind of obvious, but I put it in here. Here's the big issue. We use Salt heavily, heavily, heavily. We started doing deployments with it of custom apps. We got into it backwards. Then we started doing config management. Years have gone by. We've got reactors. We've got, we've got a lot of custom code that integrate directly with AWS. There's stuff all over the place. And what we found was over time, we needed a lot more robust testing. Manual testing wasn't cutting it anymore. And so the big question is, what is the best way to test a salt state or a high state? So fast forward to last year, I came to SaltConf with one question I wanted answered at the end of SaltConf, which was, what's the right way to test? All the experts are here. We've got all the SaltStack employees. We've got geniuses from LinkedIn and wherever. Somebody is going to tell me the right thing to do. And I went to every presentation that dealt with state testing or high state testing, and I talked to a variety of people. And so basically, the answers I got were broken down into 2 camps. There were tools inside Salt that were very predictive, like Salt says it's going to do X, Y, and Z. Or the data looks like this. Not exactly what I was looking for. And the second group was external tools. And these tools seemed like they could get the job done. People seem okay with them. Generally, they're Ruby-based. They require installation, configuration. There's dependencies with different libraries. And, I just didn't like it. It seemed like more work to set up more stuff, to test other stuff, and this stuff could go wrong. So I really wasn't very comfortable with the current setup. Okay, here's the Salt tools that I reviewed that I think are useful to know. And I'm just going to point out two of them. On the left side of your screen, you see test equals true. You probably have heard about this. This is really useful. It's useful not just when you're developing a state, but also if you've got some server in production and you want to know if a state is going to actually say it's going to make a change. That's really nice. I think that's something useful. The second one is on the right side of your screen where it says mock equals true. The reason I added that one is because if you're passing arguments to your state functions, you really want to validate that those are correct. That's kind of something else you want to test. And so that's valuable as well. This kind of runs the gamut, but essentially all these are showing you data and it's all predictive. On the flip side of that, the external tools. Here's a little survey. This isn't an inclusive list. I'm not using lots of these tools. Generally, like I said, they're Ruby-based, and they're born out of Chef, or they're born out of Puppet. They're things like server spec. You've got stuff like test harnesses, like Test Kitchen. I'm sure everybody knows about that. And things like Test Infra. The thing that really bothered me the most about these tools is that they're very opinionated. They have a way they are telling me I need to work, which I don't really like that. My wife will tell you, I don't like being told what to do. It's true, I don't. So I don't like that, and I don't like that the way they're written, it's not written to me. It's written for a full-time developer. How many people are full-time developers in this audience? Raise your hands. Anybody? Okay, so like not even half the room. Like, I don't know exactly how many hands went up, but I saw like 3. So, okay. Why are we using tools that are written for somebody else? I don't know, but I don't like it. This is the process we started with. It was the absolute easiest process that I could come up with because it wasn't really a process. I would write a state, I would apply the state, and I would inspect the server to see, did it do what I wanted? Probably some of you are doing this right now. And you can get away with this for quite a while. Bonus points to you if you're always spinning up a new VM or a new Docker container. Way to go, I didn't always do that. And that's why I put a hint at the bottom of this. If you are doing that right now, and there's no room in your schedule whatsoever, here's a hint. Create an SLS file that undoes everything in your state, so that while you're developing or testing or doing something, you can erase what you've done and then apply the state again to see at least it's kind of fresh. Does it look correct? Okay, so let's review why we need to test. I put this slide here because a lot of people think, okay, I'm using Salt. It's supposed to do stuff. Why do I need to test what it's doing? This is kind of dumb, right? It's not dumb. A Salt state, if you get down to it, is really the translation of an idea. Right? You have something in mind that you want to be your outcome. And so now you're writing some kind of steps to make that happen, and maybe you're working with some other people who are also writing some pieces. And so you're translating things. And those translations, everybody knows you get errors when you translate. And even if it's perfect, and I mean just great, like it's super simple, right? You're installing a package, you're making sure a service is running, maybe there's some special config file that you're manipulating. That's super simple, it's great, it's easy. No big deal in testing. And that was our case for a while. But then you start to do things that are fun and useful, like add in Jinja. Okay, well, this is cool. I'm pulling data from here, I've got some conditionals. Oh, pillar, oh, that's nice. Maybe I want to, instead of putting users in a Salt state, maybe I want to pull that from a pillar. Oh, that's cool. Maybe you start to use something really fancy like Salt formulas and start using map.jinja to support multiple OSs and multiple versions of those OSs. And if you're really, really cool, you'll start using include statements to break up your simple state into multiple files, where the package is in one file and the service is in another. Okay, now it's not simple anymore. It's super complex. If you look at the Salt formula for, for managing users, it's a really good example. Look at it, and if you can tell me exactly what it's doing in 10 seconds, A+. I have to study it, and I think it's confusing. So I think we need a way to test, did even our idea get translated correctly? Okay, so we know we need to test. What's ideal? Ideally, I want to write a state and write a test for that state, apply the state, and just run the test. I don't want it to be complicated. And along those lines, we're not all developers. Don't tell me I have to do real unit tests and I have to learn Ruby and their programming paradigm and whatever. Why, if I can use YAML and Jinja, why can't I just use that for my tests, right? That's simple. Let's keep it simple. Salt is an enabling platform. So what do I want to do? I want to keep using all the stuff I'm used to. I want to have flexible targeting. I want to be able to run masterless. Maybe I want to bake AMIs or Docker images or something. Maybe I'm not running agents and I want to go over SSH. Maybe I want to change the outputters so the results of my test come out as JSON and go to some database somewhere. I don't know, but I want the flexibility. I don't like a lot of configuration, right? Why do I need tons of configuration? I just want to run some simple tests. The test output I get needs to be clear and useful. And while I'm at it, I don't like this idea that you're telling me I have to only test on some 2 or 3 servers in some specific environment. Let me just test all I want. If I want to run a test against all the servers I have and I have 1,000 servers, why can't I do that? I mean, really. All the tech is there, right? Okay. And while we're at it, if we can test states, let's just be able to test high states, because that's how we really apply things. Surprise! Saltcheck gives you all this. So, to write a test, it's very simple. How many people here know enough to write just a basic salt state? Just raise your hand. Okay, like almost all the room. And how many of those same people know how to run a command line execution, like test.ping? Congratulations. You know almost everything you need to know to write Saltcheck tests. Okay, so I implemented Saltcheck as an execution module because I wanted all the built-in stuff of Salt for free. I don't want to do extra work. I wrote this so that a state is easily testable with just one file, 0 configuration, nothing. And then I made it so that a high state will introspect all the states that make up the high state, look for tests, and if those states are going to be applied to that minion, he's going to run those tests. Perfect. Now it's not fragile, right? Maybe in your dev environment you have MySQL. Maybe you have Apache. Maybe you have some HA proxy, and it's all in one box. I want to run all my tests there. I don't want any fragile tests that require me to say, oh, okay, just in this environment, it's here and here. No. I just want to say, run all the tests for this high state. Make it easy, right? If you're wondering what functionality there is in terms of what tests you can write, if a module exists today as a Salt execution module, you can use it for your test. This is powerful. The reason it's so powerful, everything you do in a state is actually a wrapper around an execution module, which means if you're doing it in a state, you can now write a test for it. And if some functionality doesn't exist, guess what? If you're not comfortable writing Python, find a nice developer that you know, have them write just a simple little Python module, and now it's testable. Pretty slick. I just want to make a point. This is in Salt open now in the development branch. There's a bullet point here under easy to write, and this is the secret feature in the new version. This supports all rendering of Salt Stack. All renderers. So if you're using Jinja, great. You can use Jinja in your test. If you're using PyObjects, that's fine. I don't care. What I'm doing is I'm cheating. I'm calling the Salt renderer to say, hey, take this test, render it, give it back to me. So this means as soon as there's a new render, boom, it's testable. So this will follow whatever you're using today. And again, if there's any questions, really, stop me, ask your question. You'll find out in a second. Okay, so you get all this stuff for free, and we're doing stuff by convention. So what is the convention? What do you have to do? There is a change. If you have a state that's written as an SLS file, let's say it's database.sls, it now needs, if you want to run my Saltcheck, it needs to be implemented as a directory. So it would be database as a directory with an init.sls file underneath. Okay, that's not such a big deal. Where do the tests go? This is the reason it has to be a state. They go as a subdirectory of your state, and that's in Saltcheck tests. This one is a choice I made. The test files have to end in .tst. I didn't have to do that, right? I could just say, hey, pick up any files that are in this directory, just use them, big deal. I wrote this specifically because you may have a to-do list that you don't want to have to put somewhere else. You want to keep it next to the test, but you don't want it interfering with your test. Okay, that's fine. You can include it. I don't care. I'm not going to run it. I'll leave it alone. A test file at the bare minimum is going to have YAML, and it's going to call a salt module and a function. That's really about almost all you need to know. And a test is really one YAML block, very, very similar to a salt state. And each test block is going to return, and this is where it's a test, it's going to return a value, and you make an assertion about if that should match up with what you expected. Should it be greater? Should it be lower? Should it be involved? Should it be included in the list of things that came back? That kind of thing. So that's the test piece. So that's nice, but if you want to see how it looks, I don't know how it's looking on the screen. Is it okay? Okay. On the left side of your screen, this is just a directory tree. And you can see, I just wanted to put this so it's kind of easy to internalize. Here you have salt, and that is a state tree. And you can see I have a state called AWS tools. And in that, I'm installing Boto and some files and whatnot. But really, you see an init.sls file underneath that. And as well, you see the Saltcheck test directory, the subdirectory. And in that is one test file. And that's enough to test, okay? That's all that's required. Now, in that test file, you need some tests. So on the right side of your screen, I listed out 4 different tests. And this is a valid Saltcheck test file. So here I'm doing 4 tests. Twice I'm calling pip.list. And just checking to make sure that Boto and also AWS CLI are in the expected return value. So I'm asserting that Boto is in the list that comes back to me. I'm asserting that AWS CLI is in the list that comes back to me. The third test, I'm checking to see if a file exists. I need my credentials file to exist in this case. And so I'm checking and I say, I'm going to run file, that file exists. Right? Probably you guys are familiar with the file functions, hopefully. And I just say, yeah, it should come back as true. And I'm asserting that that is equal to whatever comes back. I expect it to be true, so I say, please make sure this is true. In addition, I want to make sure it's the right credentials file. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. In this case, I'm just doing something simple. I'm saying, get me the sum. And I'm passing 2 arguments. I'm passing the file path, and I'm also passing MD5. That's the kind of hash I want. And you can see I put the expected return, and I say this should be equal to whatever comes back. Okay, so let's go through one little practice to do a translation. Let's say I want to see if a file exists on a server. If I'm on the command line, I can easily say salt, I target the minion or set of minions, and I run the module called file, and then I call the function file exists, and I pass in the path. In this case, it's silly, temp hello. Now, if you translate this, the lower half of the page, you can see I have an ID, test1 hello file. This is very similar to a salt state name. These need to be unique within a set of tests for a state, because I gather these up and I report back to you the results. You can see the module and function are really the same, file.file exists, and I'm passing in the argument, temp hello. Now I expect this to exist, so I assert equal and true. Now I could have said I don't want this to exist, and I could have put assert not equal or assert false, and show the expected return to be false, this kind of thing. So I think that's kind of clear. Is that okay? Yeah? Kind of simple to see what's going on. And you can see there is no requirement to do some crazy programming thing. You don't have to have any special knowledge. It's kind of simple. Okay, so what kind of tests can you do? For this, I did refer to PyTest, and I said, well, I don't know what people are going to test, but seems like that's a good community of people who have been testing stuff for a long time, so let's just assert at least a decent subset of these tests. So you can assert that what comes back is equal to your expected return, not equal, true, false, in, not in. So for instance, those I put in because I wanted to check that a certain package was installed. And so I might say, give me all the packages installed in the system, and I want to assert that Apache is installed in that list. I could say, I want to assert greater, greater or equal, less or less than equal. So how do I run it? It's too easy. It's too good to be true, except it's true. To run a test for a state, you simply run the module .run state test and then the name of the test. If you've got crazy targeting lists where you say -L and it's like web 1, web 85, Juniper 2, I don't care what your naming is. I don't care what the targeting is. This is all going to work. If you want to run all the tests that make up a high state for a server, you just change the function name to run high state tests. And in this case, I gather those up dynamically, so you don't need to pass any state names. The last thing on this is probably weird. You're probably not used to seeing this master cache business. What happens is, I have to share a little bit about how this works, the way I get all the states to the minions. So what I do before I run a test is I actually want this whole state tree from the master to be pulled down to the minion. And this is how I'm able to take a look at what states or would be applied in a high state, and I'm able to walk that tree, assemble those tests, and then run them, and then return back to the master the results. So you have two options. Option one, you can run update the master cache after you create a test, and that way it syncs that test over to the minion. So that might be nice, maybe in a staging environment or something. But here's the thing, I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to run extra commands all the time. I mean, come on, let's be honest. That's why we script and things, right? Come on. So what I did is I made it so you can set a really simple flag. You can either put this in the minion config, or you can assign it in a pillar and then target that to minions. And this is auto update master cache. So what happens in that case, when you say run state tests or run high state tests, if I see that flag is set, I simply pull that cache stuff over to the minion, so you don't have to run the command. It's not made so much for you as it was for my laziness, but it worked out. So here's the process. It's not a whole lot different, but it's a whole lot easier. You can see there's just running Saltcheck at the end of this now. So I think it's nice to have all of this knowledge, but it's a lot nicer to see it in action. It becomes more believable. So I created some movies because I'm afraid of demos not working. And I'm going to go through those and have you take a look. Oh, no, I need permission to view this. OK, that's a bummer. Let me grant this guy permission. OK, here we go. No, OK. You're right, the demo gods are being a little mean. OK, so this first demo is really just showing how this runs. And I hope you can read it on the screen. I don't know, it might be a little small. But it's really just showing how states are tested. And I have this little typer program I made, so it looks kind of natural. See, I'm typing perfectly here, typing perfectly with one hand, no hands. OK, so this I'm just showing a few things to kind of make it clear. I'm showing the directory for the state collect D. OK, and here you can see there's a collect D directory that has a files subdirectory, so it's got some configs. There's an init.sls file, and then there's the subdirectory for Saltcheck tests with one test file in it called collect D tests. Everyone can see this OK, I hope? Yeah? OK, great. Okay. So just to be honest, I'm showing the salt state for collect D. So you can see, yeah, it's a real state. I'm not claiming it's perfect. It's kind of for demo purposes, but it's okay. So you can see here I'm installing a couple packages. I'm managing a file. I'm making sure that collect D HA proxy is installed so I can throw some data from HA proxy over. And I'm also managing a file. This is actually kind of a sloppy bad state. If you're new, don't take this as golden. So now here it gets a little more interesting. I'm going to show the test for that state. Okay, so here you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different tests. The first test is saying, is collect D in my list of packages on the server? Oh, why are you saying A? Oh, okay. Thank you. What's nice about this, if you think about this, package is actually loaded in by the Salt loader. It's not actually saying yum list my packages. So this test would actually work on several different systems. In addition, you have pip.freeze. I said, oh, well, let's use something different. I'm showing you can use pip.freeze. And you can say, oh, I'm asserting that this collect D HA proxy is in the output of running that command. And lastly, I'm showing, I want the service status for collect D. If you run service.status, it will come back as true if the service is running. So I expect the return to be true. And so I'm saying I assert that this will be equal to what actually comes back. The true should equal true. And now I'm going to show it running. So you can see I'm issuing run state tests and the state name, the actual state name, collect D. And here you see the output. So it says local because I used salt call. If I use salt, it would say the name of the minion. And you can see this is broken down by state. So you see the package name or the test name and then the pass or fail underneath. Now, one thing I want to point out, I said the goal was to make clear, useful data. So the test results show how many failed, how many are missing, and how many passed. The missing is not so applicable to one state, but when you test all the states for a high state, you might want to know how many states don't have tests. So I added that in. Okay, so that's the first demo. It's okay. It's not crazy sexy, but I think there's no questions on that one, right? It's kind of clear? Okay. All right, now this is a little bit cooler. So if you remember, I said you can write all your tests dynamically. Dynamic generated tests. That's cool. That doesn't exist in other testing world. So I'm showing you. Here's pillar data. I have 4 bogus users, and yeah, it's JSON because I made this one JSON just to show I can do it. But so what? Now, if I was going to write with just YAML, I would require 4 different tests. That sounds like more work. It sounds boring. It sounds tedious. It should be easier. Well, if you know, in pillar, you can grab stuff with Jinja. So why don't we just do that? Why don't we have Jinja and YAML generate the right number of tests? Sounds cooler, right? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so let's see what that test would look like. Okay, so it's one little small YAML block with some Jinja around it. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with pulling data out of Pillar using Jinja, I'll just kind of go through it. Here I'm saying get the list of users from Pillar. It's actually a dictionary, but gather that. And walk through each of these. Create a unique test name, user.account-test. So that will be in my output, right, when Saltcheck test runs. I'm not passing in any arguments or keyword args or Pillar data, but I am saying this user, he should be in the list of users that I get back on that minion. Okay, that's the only test. So now let's run it and see how it looks. Okay, yeah, I made some slow pauses. And again, I'm just calling users. I'm not doing anything fancy. And here you can see, even though there was just one block, we now have 4 tests passing. This is cool stuff. This is really cool. This means you can make it do whatever you dream of, right? Pretty neat stuff. Okay, so let's do another demo now that we have it all really worked out. Let's show how to do high-state tests. Now, you can use Salt Run or Salt Call, and you can do high states on just one minion, or you can use this across all your minions. So I'm showing both in this particular demo. And here you can see I have 3 states. I'm just using base, and I'm showing there's a state called nothing. Guess what? It's a valid state. It just does test.ping, but it doesn't do anything. There's no tests. Collect D, which you saw, and web server, which is a bogus state. It doesn't do much. But in this case, we expect, hey, there should be, some kind of output for these different states, right? And so I'm going to just show the tree of server salt. And here you can see, okay, it looks kind of like we expect. But again, in the nothing state, there's no Saltcheck test subdirectory. And now we run the high state tests. Now notice you don't have to put any state name after that. It says, whatever states there should be, just run those for me. Okay, so this output is a little more interesting. You still get local because you're using salt call, but you can see the different tests that passed for collect D. You can see for nothing, you see it's listed here, but okay, there's no tests, you get no output. For web server, you see 2 of the tests passed, 1 failed. Aha, that's interesting. And you can see the reason it failed right here. And this one, I was doing a test.echo, and I made it fail on purpose. And you see the reason Bob says hello is not equal to, hi, my name is Bob. Makes sense. And probably more importantly is the output at the end. You can see 1 test failed, 1 state was missing tests completely, and 6 tests passed. If you wanted that to be the output of JSON, you just put dash dash out equals JSON, right? Pretty slick.
Is there a way to extract the states things, the list of states things, state tests?
How do you vision that?
I'm not really sure we talked about it afterwards, but I was just curious if you have, since you're already knowing that you're missing state you're testing against.
Oh, okay.
We may not know, and if there's 100 states, being able to go, these are the 6 states that have no tests.
Okay, yeah, that could be a feature that I could add. So I could say, these states didn't have it, here's the number. Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, good point. Okay, so in this high state run, I said run this against all the minions I have. Okay, so this was Vagrant on my laptop. There are 2 minions, not a lot. One was named CNC, and you can see test just like you expected. And now I scroll up, and you can see there was another server called Web. Same kind of thing ran. Oh. Okay, sorry, next slide. Okay, so when I made this, the goal was to make my life a little easier. I don't want to install crazy stuff. I don't want to learn Ruby and so on. And it was all about state testing and high state testing. But by the time I got done with this, I realized this is actually kind of a cool tool, right? Because I now have a way to make a bunch of stuff run and to assert what the output should be. So, for instance, I could add this to compliance or auditing. I could make a state called my company's policy 1.1, make it a real state with an init.sls that says test.ping, make a subdirectory, Saltcheck test, and put in all the tests that my boss tells me we have to care about. I need to make sure only these guys have sudo. I need to make sure these files aren't writable by John. I need to make sure that these services are running, but whatever, right? And so now, suddenly, I have a way to do this. And it's very, very clear and very easy to maintain. You can use Salt Scheduler, you could use cron, you could attack this to run it whenever you want. And it runs very fast, and you can run it across all your minions. You know, maybe it's 20 seconds, I don't know. In addition, the dynamic testing, which I showed with the users, you could use that for all kinds of things. So for instance, let's say you're using salt formulas today, and you really like how it works, and you want to capture that package name. You could simply pull in the map.jinja that exists that differentiates the package names and the service names and locations of configs. You can use them here. You can simply say, okay, I'm going to use the same variable. I interpret the Jinja the same way, right? Pretty cool. I've actually used this on troubleshooting in production, where because I have tests, and I said, oh, you know, it seems like one of these servers is not, something's funny. Well, why don't I just run my tests, right? I can say, oh, okay, well, I can cross off this whole list of problems, or I can say, oh, it's definitely this issue right here. That's pretty cool. I put high-state addition on here because I think this is kind of a neat thing. You could include that at the end of a high-state run. You could say, call my module to test all the high states at the end of a high-state run. Oh, that means every high-state run, it runs all the tests for you. That's kind of neat. That's it. That's the whole presentation. Thanks. Thanks very much. Oh, yeah, sure.
So you mentioned that this is in the current development branch. Is it a bunch of modules and utils and so on that is capable of being backported into our own, like 2017 releases if necessary?
It's one module. So it's called saltcheck.py. And you can copy it into your, if you have a underscore modules, like a custom module area, you could put it in there today and use it. I believe it will work with at least several versions back of Salt, but I haven't tested all the versions. I kind of use it, you know, for my own environment. Yeah?
So I was wondering how you would test, like, say you have a file.manage state, that's a file that's like configured differently on like A and B.
Yeah.
I saw you could check like the MD5 hash, or what that result file is. How would you test that like on minion A had one MD5 hash and on minion B it had a different?
So I would probably look at how I was designating the files to be different on minion A types versus minion B, and then use Jinja or some other templating to simply pull that into the test.
So would you just test that like the thing that you're telling me is correct? Or
Well, as close as you can get it to the exact thing you expect, the better it will be. So I might do a hash. I might do use like, does this text exist in this file? Because it's going to be the thing that's different in the two. I don't know. I'd have to know more about the exact case. Yeah. But one thing to point out, if a functionality doesn't exist today that you really want, you can write a module, and as soon as you distribute it, you can test with it now. That's powerful. Yeah. No, the lowest granularity is the state level for these tests, but that's an interesting idea. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to repeat questions all the time, but the question was, can you run one specific TST file versus several that you have underneath Saltcheck test subdirectory? And the answer is no. The smallest granularity is the state level today. But I'm very interested in new functionality that people really want to use and will use. So hit me up on Twitter or email or whatever. I'm interested in working on it.
Does this work under Orchestrate Runner?
Yes. Because Orchestrate Runner, you are running a module or a state, and this is a module, so yes. Can it test orchestrates? Yeah, sure, right? Because what you could do, like I gave the example of compliance, you could make a bogus state for your orchestration, and you could say, okay, here's what I care about in the orchestration, and you could use Jinja maybe to fetch data that's interesting in that environment, or however you're dividing it up. So theoretically, yes, but I didn't really target that. It's kind of kludgy. Yeah. All right, if there's no other questions, I think I'm going to call it. Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.